Good evening, everybody.
Good evening,
It's
Ken.
good to see everyone. I want to welcome everyone back after a long hiatus to episode 546 of Line Upon Line, the distortion of truth in an age of propaganda and spin. Tonight we have Michael and Jason, and as always, my friend on the other end, Dr. Ricks. If you would start us out, that would be wonderful.
Okay, just a few quick groaners. Things I'm great at after the age of 70. Forgetting someone's name 10 seconds after they tell me. And this one really is true. Calculating how much sleep I'll get if I can just fall asleep now. That really does happen. I thought I would throw in a few.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
What's he going to throw in? Oh, there you go.
Booze. Yeah, a ghoul's favorite drink. Anything with booze. That's a lot of people's favorite drink. What do ghosts use to put on their makeup? Vanishing cream. And this is the piece de resistance, sort of. Why are ghouls and ghosts so bad at lying? Because people can see right through them.
You're letting us off easy after all this time off. I'm shocked.
You've heard that one before, right?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, some people told me jokes at the feast that they had heard on the podcast, or maybe they forgot that I told it to them. And you better hear this. I said, didn't I tell that 3 weeks ago? Never mind. But that's okay. I don't mind being quoted and misquoted, as long as they remember me.
There you go.
Like some show business people say. Okay, well, deception is a big deal in the age of propaganda and spin. Like everyone knows the White House's press secretary, especially for certain parties, they're really great spinners. I mean, they spin like a top. What was the redheaded one called?
Pisaki. Ken Psaki.
It seemed like it was Rat Back Saki. She would retell it again, and I can't remember how they expressed it. Like she would loop back Saki and loop back. Wait a minute, here's what we really meant. Anyway,
You talking about the redheaded one?
Yeah.
What do we call her? Ginger Goebbels. You like that?
Well, anyway, when the devil is really the father of lies, that's what the Bible calls it. And we're in an age, the 20th century was a century with the greatest number of genocides. First one started in World War I, but a lot of them started between the two wars with the communists and are obviously in World War II. But they were also accompanied by vast propaganda machines. In other words, you have genocide and you have propaganda to cover it or prepare people for it. Dr. Goebbels, actually one of his more famous saying was, he was the ministry of truth.
Yeah.
They tried, actually, our government tried that too. Anyway, he had a giant ministry, big building, Ministry of Truth, and Babelsberg is where he did all his movies. He said the best propaganda is where people don't know they're being propagandized. They made straight propaganda, but they also made a ton of movies where people were taught to hate the Jews in Central Europe, preparing the way for the Holocaust. Propaganda prepared the way for it. And entertainment, he said, is the best way to propagandize.
Yep.
You see a lot of media today that has an agenda, or if it doesn't have an overt agenda, it just has subtle hints along the way. I've found that, especially in watching stuff with my kids, or programs that are geared towards children and things like that. It's not overt. They're not pushing any of the agenda too hard or too in your face necessarily, but it's just kind of in there. It's just sort of in passing, a lot of the party line and all that stuff. You just find it in there kind of quickly, and it's cute, and it goes by, and that's that. But it's in there, and it feels like it's a preparing the ground kind of thing. It's just sort of settle in the background, and before you know it, you'll just accept whatever that is as the truth.
They've been doing
It's
that
been so
for
often.
decades, ever since I can remember.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember?
I love Captain
I was
Planet.
just
He's a
gonna
hero.
say, remember Captain Planet? It's been in
Yeah.
there. It's been in our media forever. I mean, you've seen it. It started in the '60s, and it's been going on ever since. From one thing to the next, and it's always driven me nuts. I never could stand it.
I was real surprised that there was one that came out when I was, well, probably before, but they were showing it on the reel to reels. But you remember Marlo Thomas and Friends? It was called Free to Be You and Me. And that was really trying to bust up a lot of traditional stuff. And I look at it now, it's like, I didn't really recognize it when I was a little kid, but I see it big time now. But the way that I think that even things with the kids is what they want to do is attach their ideas to the heartstrings of people. That's how they get them to buy into that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone a long
give
way since Leave It to Beaver.
It's an emotion. Oh, goodness gracious, yeah.
Or Father
Father
Knows Best.
You could.
They wouldn't even allow that on the air anymore,
No.
would they? And that wasn't a bad show. I mean, it was corny, but it was not a bad show.
It's corny now. That's another thing. When that stuff was fresh, it wasn't corny, but it's corny now when you look back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you were living
Yeah.
it was. I mean, like right now, you can go back and watch a lot of shows from the '70s and '80s, and they seem corny. But I remember watching them when I was a kid, and they didn't seem corny back then. We liked Happy Days. Everybody watched Happy Days, and the one right
I
after
remember
that,
that.
Laverne and Shirley, and it was funny and it was goofy, but they didn't. You look back now, it's just silly. But back in the time, it was good entertainment. We enjoyed it. But now most people would say it's just, like you said, corny.
I just one thing that, and I think it was with the grandkids, but might have been before that. They had these little children cartoons where the villain wanted to poison the planet. You see how that doesn't make any sense. It wasn't that he was after money. I mean, that was part of it, but why would you want to poison the planet? It's irrational.
Mm-hmm.
But also I noticed in most dramas, even currently, they're always complaining about medical costs, as if to say, we got to have socialized medicine totally. And I'm not saying that medical issues aren't complicated and states have different Medicaid programs and all that, and they can be improved. But I can sense all the programs are pushing for socialized medicine. And then before you get too excited, you look at what it did to England, and I could elaborate. But I see that's what TV is pushing for.
Mm-hmm. Everything that they put out has got garbage mixed into it.
Yeah. So think about who they pick as the villain, gives you some idea what they're fighting for. Can you read John 8:44 for us, please, Ken?
You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it.
And by the way, Christ was accusing religious leaders of doing that, which is a bit scary when you think about it. But and there are a lot of lies that are out there in the philosophical and clerical world and academic world. People you should look up to often are pushing theories that really are terrible, like the oppressor-oppressed theory. You try to simplify history to something like that, it's outrageous. That means if you win, you automatically become an oppressor. and the oppressed can do any evil thing they want, and it's justified. That is so crazy. It's almost, but that's what academia has been pushing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got right now the one political party is running commercials to tell the women to lie to their husbands, and several other bad messages they're sending out there for you can vote for anybody you want. You ain't got to tell him. He ain't never gonna find out.
They're using the slogan of Las Vegas. What happens in the booth stays in the
like
booth.
That. But they're endorsing lying to your husband, basically.
I want you to read the next two scriptures. I want to discuss these: Revelation 16:13 and 1 Kings 22:22, because I think these are two really important scriptures in the context of lies.
And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet.
And then let's go to 1 Kings 22.
The Lord said to him, in what say? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, you shall persuade him and also prevail. Go out and do so.
Now, one is the Revelation one is for future. The false prophet will be able to deceive the world. And the one is from the past. I want to discuss the one from the past. If you go to 1 Kings 20, and that in the context, you'll see that Ahab, God was ready to take him and give him an honorable death instead of what he originally was going to give him. Anyway, but he wanted him to die in battle. So he wanted him to go to war with Syria, which is a little bit bigger country. And so he was getting advice, from the clerics and others who are supposed to know God's will, who's going to give you victory. And God wanted him to go. And we might ask ourselves, why would God commission or let a spirit be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets? And that is a big question. But I want to add a little more to the discussion. If you look at the Old Testament in context, you'll see that when a nation becomes idolatrous and disobedient to God, God seems to allow them to get false advice from opinion leaders and clerics and do stupid things that lead to their disaster. And there's a pattern you'll see when the last northern 10 went into captivity and when Judah went into captivity. In both cases, I'll go to the Judah one, but the other one is similar. In both cases, the opinion leaders and prophets around Zedekiah, the king, they said, look, the Egyptians are refurbishing their army. They're strong. We and the Egyptians can hold off the Babylonians. You shouldn't stay a vassal king. Rebel. The others said rebel and counter Egypt too. In both cases, Egypt was not reliable. But God allowed them to listen to lying prophets. Now the question is, why does God allow spirit world to deceive opinion leaders? Because isn't that really what it boils down to? We might argue about, what was God doing talking to these spirits, and why would a spirit that God talks to put lies in the minds of people? But regardless of how it was done, the question is, why would God allow it?
Well, God, if mankind chooses not to follow God, he's going to allow him to have what he wants, whether he really knows what he wants or not. I'm thinking about this where God let man have what he wanted when mankind had it's a perfect example of what we're seeing today, because men go the wrong way. Mankind was never meant to lead himself. He was never equipped to rule himself. That goes all the way back when they said we want a king. They wanted to be like the other nations. And so when Samuel told them that, all this got told through Samuel, but they already had a king. They didn't realize that. You know what I'm saying? They already had a god, a leader, a ruler, and so he gave them what they wanted. And I guess he had mercy on them, and he gave David, after Saul. But if mankind does not want what God, he said, I set life and death, blessing and cursing before you. So if we don't choose the blessing, we're going to get the curse.
It is an interesting like an overlap, because it's like God is approving of, in the instance, something that is evil and wrong. And I remember those scriptures striking me as very odd, reading, when you first start reading and studying, and even still, you hit that and it gives you pause. It is something to consider. But Jason's absolutely right. Like, once you take yourself out of God's protection, there's no controlling that. Another similar instance that occurred to me in thinking about this was the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, which almost seems, it's like, God hardened his heart so he wouldn't relent, so he wouldn't break down soon. But it was too late. It was too late for him, and it was too late for that society. And God had already determined that he was going to bring his people out with a very strong hand, in a way that was going to leave a mark on the entire world, bring them out with power and with wealth and with other things that wouldn't have happened that way if he had relented sooner. And even for all that, in the end, what obviously God has proved right, Pharaoh still pursues them. He still goes after them. He regrets it, and that wasn't, that's a different part of the story altogether. But you take yourself out of off the right path, or out of God's protection, and you're gonna hit a point where there's no saving it.
A thought occurred to me: opinion leaders in our world. I mean, certainly there are clerics who are major opinion leaders, but a lot of our opinion leaders are TV hosts of TV shows, movie stars, and maybe other types of media stars. And isn't it interesting that the vast majority of Hollywood stars, TV host stars, athletic stars, all seem to push toward ungodly principles? Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
You might think Hollywood would be 50-50, wouldn't you?
No.
Well, the content that they push out is not 50-50. So I as a reflection of what they actually produce and what they espouse and promote on a regular basis, I don't know, it lines up a little more exactly. Obviously people can be involved in projects that aren't quite so overt or objectionable. But if you look at the overall trend of where music and TV and movies and influencers, whatever it may be, whatever you consider fame to be these days online, and all that, the direction that they are pushing society, it lines up more with that. It seems an accurate representation.
So if all the stars and opinion leaders are pushing toward certain directions, you can almost bet money it's not a good direction. It's not a godly direction. And God is allowing it, at least if the country's going the wrong way. I just want to throw, though this isn't the theme of the thing, I threw this scripture in there as a deceptive thing people believe. Would you read John 3:16, please, Ken?
For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Now, the world believes that you will not perish. You either will be in heaven, shuffling harp music and hymnals, or you'll be tortured forever and ever in Dante's Inferno in hell. That's just not true. Your punishment might be permanent in that you're ashes and you're gone, but God is not a sadist who'll have you tortured forever and ever and ever and ever. That's just is not. That's one of the lies that's out there.
Yeah, and that's a pet scripture. I mean, that's a favorite promoted, oft quoted Protestant scripture. And it says very clearly, thou shalt not perish. But that part is just sort of floofed over as if it's not an important aspect of it. It is.
Would you read John 18:37, please,
Sure.
Ken?
Jesus answered that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice.
So when we learn to love the truth, you're more likely to understand the Bible. And that's the battle. Don't you think people, we can talk about gaslighting, but is there a certain attraction to gaslighting if it gaslights you in the direction you want to be gaslit? That's a verb, to be gaslit.
Gaslighted? No. Is it?
Gaslit?
Yeah, Lytton. There you go. Yeah, I mean, you can always find, if you want to find somebody that's going to tell you what you want to hear, you can. There's plenty of opinions out there. Everybody's got one.
Yeah, tell me what I want to hear, and that's everybody is attracted to that. Prove me that I've been right all along. I mean, I like to hear that too, but we have to learn to love the real truth.
Yep,
that's true. I know that there's people who, I was talking to somebody about this at the feast, but there's a difference in understanding this, it making sense, because I know people who will go, well, yeah, I understand this, that the Sabbath is Saturday, but they don't have a conviction in their heart. They don't have a pursuit towards the truth. And so, they will, I think, sometimes search to find an excuse, like you're talking about, to hear what they want, to where they don't have to commit to something. You know what I mean? It's like, I can keep looking around here and somebody's going to give me something that will let me know that I don't have, because this is a commitment. This is a commitment. But when you put it into perspective, that what was done for us, the scripture you just read before this one, what was actually done for us, what we're committing to, what was committed for us was far greater than we can even begin to put our minds inside of. But when God, the key to everything is the Holy Spirit. And when you receive that, this is not just an understanding. This is something that you base your life on.
Well, plenty of people understand that the Sabbath is Saturday, but even if you read Bullinger's, he said, yeah, the Sabbath is Saturday, but you don't got to keep it.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect that they want to believe that it's done away with and they can do anything they want, even though there's nothing they don't want to do in the Bible except for the Sabbath and maybe the idols and taking the Lord's name in vain here and there. But other than that, they don't have a problem with the commandments.
just every once in a while.
Some people every other sentence, but some people every once in a while.
It's that seventh day part of it. Just say the Sabbath, leave that seventh day part off, and it's okay.
Yeah, there's a reason it's referred to as the 10th commandment. You have to come out of the world to keep that Saturday, to keep the Sabbath on the seventh day.
Can be a problem. And in the new age we are in, a lot of truth is blocked. It's not just what they tell you, it's also what they hide from us.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, though it isn't totally relevant at this point in the paper, but the 51 guys who all had worked for the CIA that said the laptop from hell was Russian interference. I actually believe they knew the truth because the FBI had the laptop for a year and a half. I believe they actually knew what they were doing.
Oh, they
I
did
know
know.
they said, well, we worded it in such a vague way that we said it's probably Russian. Yeah, I think they actually
Well, they
knew
did, because this week it came out that they knew. This week it came out in the news that they all knew.
Oh, they knew?
They knew it at the time when they did it. They said that.
Oh,
it was in news this
games.
week. It was in the news. At the time they made that statement. They knew what they were saying was a lie.
I believe that too. But I heard one a couple months ago. He said, well, we would, he did the mealy mouth word game. Well, we said we thought it might be probably, but we say probably threw a little of that in the end too. And the point I want to make is they block truth when it matters. If the truth comes out later, little by little, and no one pays a penalty for it.
Nobody.
I like see that's true. That's true. When you say hidden, because you know, like, isn't it when you're going to give sworn testimony, you say to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So, in other words, you're not going to hold back, especially like a full disclosure. What do they like to say? We're transparent, and there's I know that I've been in situations sometimes where there's certain things private in my life that I don't have to go disclose to people. If it's nobody's business, but we're talking about things that are going to matter, as far as they're going to be detrimental in one way if this truth is hidden. And oh yeah, that's part of what this spin is that y'all were talking about earlier. If we can just keep doing, what was that show? Well, the guy did. Oh, maybe it wasn't a good show to mention, but he said, "I love to." He was the governor of Texas. He goes, "I love to do a sidestep." And he was always.
What show?
Anyways,
What movie was that?
It was the best little whorehouse in
That's what it
Texas.
was.
Oh yeah, okay.
And he was always evading the media. And he goes, "I love to do the sidestep." Anyways, I don't know why I remembered that. I guess, but anyways, yeah. So people and politicians are real good at that. They will slide. They will change the subject. They will say things to keep things hidden.
There's another aspect of that, I think, in vanity, in the quest for power, even in like self-righteousness, or you're overly sure that what you want or what you're pushing for is good or the best thing, and so you'll otherwise break many other moral laws to promote it or to get it there, right? Like people will lie willingly if they think it's going to work out better for their cause or for their candidate or for whatever it may be at the time. They kind of justify it, and I think that's why. And that's a danger to everybody to stoop to manipulation when you think it'll be a good outcome. Well, it'll make it okay because the net result is going to be positive, so I'm gonna do that. Well, that's self-righteousness, and that's absconding with God's law. And you have to have a love for the truth. You have to have real self-control and a love for the truth to not do that. And I think that's such a valuable thing in God's eyes. The other side of this study is obviously like honesty and truthfulness is the positive side of that. And was it the calling of Nathaniel, I think, when Christ, said, I saw you under the tree. He said, "Behold, an Israelite in whom is no guile." Like, here is an honest dude, a straight shooter, and all that, for the Lord to call that aspect of his personality out. It's of great value if you can just be honest, even if it doesn't suit your team or your party or your agenda or whatever it may be. You still have a responsibility to the truth above all things. I think God respects that.
And they also will do what you were talking about to keep their self out of jail.
No.
And that's what we're seeing right now. I mean, you kind of drawing me into this with this, but that's exactly what we're seeing in this political battle. Is one side wants to stay out of prison for all the trash they've done, and they know if it was ever released, they'd be put in behind bars. All the deception and lies and all the tap dancing they've done over the past 20 years, some of them.
Such is the state of affairs that we have to deal with, though, that both sides say that exact same thing. And it fatigues people because it is so hard to cut through the nonsense and find the real truth that it almost isn't worth it to a lot of folks. And they would rather go with whatever is easy or whatever appeals to them carnally or, to socially, how their family keeps things smooth, whatever it may be. Never mind, because you can go out and hear, you can find whatever it is that you want to hear. And both sides say that exact same thing. One is going to be in prison if he's not in the White House. No, it's the other one. Come on. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the wherewithal and the time and the motivation, the desire for the truth to track that down, you could dismiss it all out of hand. And that's part of the game too. Muddy the water so much that you don't know. No, you can't ever figure it out.
Yep. By the way, who was it? Back there was a presidential. It was when Mitt Romney ran. A senator,
the Speaker of the Senate, Democrat.
Yeah, the leader of the Senate.
The Senate told a lie about him. By the way, do you know it's in the rules of the Senate? In the wells of the Senate, they can lie, and it's legal. I mean, they can knowingly lie, and it's legal. That's in the rules of the Senate.
The senator, I forget his name, but the senator called some news organization, said Mitt Romney never pays his taxes, and the news paper or whatever ran the story, anonymous source or whatever source, or maybe it was him, said that Mitt Romney doesn't pay taxes. And then the next day, that same senator said, look, it's in the news that Mitt Romney never pays his taxes. And then they went back later and they interviewed him. And you can find this if you look. This senator, I forget what his name is. But he said, they interviewed him and said, don't you think that was wrong? Because, Mitt Romney did pay his taxes. He goes, well, he didn't win, did he? In other words,
the ends justify the means.
The ends justify the means.
Democrat.
And that's another aspect of what we're talking about.
He knew he was lying, but he knew
Harry
the media
Reid.
would run
Harry
with it.
Reid. Thank you.
Yeah, and the media would run with it. They wouldn't fact check because it's against the Republicans. So why would they care? And they do a lot of that. By the way, the ends justify the means has things with communism is really terrible, because if the ends are gulags and all kind of death camps and whole horrible things, you get the means, but the ends never really come to fruition. They never create the economic paradise, et cetera, et cetera. But they did get all the evil means. Boy, did they get them. I'll mention it later about a book about all the horrible things the communists did, but they covered it with lies. Would you read 1 Thessalonians 2:3 for us, Ken?
All right. For that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God. He sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved.
Love of the truth. That's what we should strive for. Love of the truth. Because we're going to be living in a world. Now, we did mention this, that at the second coming, when Christ comes back, then true knowledge will be everywhere. But until then, expect a lot of mess and lies. We've got 3 scriptures all listed. Maybe we can go through one at a time and just talk about them. Would you start at 59:9, please, Ken?
Sure. Therefore, justice is far from us, nor does righteousness overtake us. For we look for light, but there is darkness. For righteousness, but we walk in blackness. Or brightness, but we walk in blackness. We grope for the wall like the blind, and we grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as at twilight. We look for justice, but there is none. It is far from us.
Now, when you look at the current, maybe not all, but many of the current kangaroo courts and other garbage going on in America, we're losing a lot of justice. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I was going to say, it was reminding me, because when I was looking at this earlier before we started, but it's like Amos 8:11. There's going to be a famine, but it's going to be the hearing of the words of the Lord, and that's the truth. I look at that and it's going to be utter confusion. It's going to be all over the place, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it in the high courts. We're seeing it everywhere, and they're trying to do away with God, is what it is. The ultimate plan.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I know, a certain politician and those who follow decriminalize shoplifting. Well, it had to be $1,000 before it was worth the police doing anything. And then workers in the stores are told, don't mess with the shoplifters. They may sue us for trying to stop them from stealing. I'm not making this up. It's crazy as this out. And so stores in a certain state have been so looted and so devastated by gangs of shoplifters that they've lost many, many top retailers. Was it San Francisco that lost 18 Walmarts and some CVS drugstores? They just ran them out of business. They couldn't put up with it. They just left. Most of them left the state of California altogether. And that's what I call a lack of justice. And there are all kinds of stories of murderers who they let out on bail. They intimidate witnesses. Well, you've heard some stories, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in a Walmart like that. I think I mentioned it on the program one time. Outside of Chicago, everything. I mean, up in the ceiling of the Walmart was all these like Glaxon lights. You know, it's like it's like I don't know. They would fire off if someone stole something. The whole store lights would flash, and things were locked down all over the store. I asked somebody where I was working at the time on a project. I said, "Is that a bad area over there?" And they said, "No." Well, we don't have those Walmarts where I live. They don't do that where I live, but they do here, evidently.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't spread. There's one place I know, we'll mention the city and state, but it's not in Missouri, say that, where when you exit the Walmart, you show them your ticket and they go through it line by line and they study your card. Be sure you haven't taken anything you didn't pay for. And that slows things down. You want to get out of the store and go home, but you got to go through the security gauntlet.
Yeah.
But I imagine they were forced to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stores like the Walmarts here. They have an attendant there, but I think it's random who they check because they don't want to back up the line. But what I do, which works, but I'm not a thief, but I walk up there and I have my receipt ready to show them. And I mean, I'm not giving anybody a tip on how to steal, but if you do that, generally they trust you as an honest person. They say, go ahead, and you get to go on. I hope I just didn't teach somebody a neat trick, but I have nothing to hide. That's why I do that. I say, here's my receipt. I don't want to dig it out of my pocket. I want to be ready,
And there's some of these voting laws. It's almost like they're saying, in your face, we want to legalize cheating on the election. I've heard it's like there's no shame.
Where was it where they were arguing? Some court or some judge or something said that illegals could vote, or they were trying to get a bunch of illegals to be able to vote. It was something with the process of them becoming legal, but they weren't legal yet. And there was this, and they were in a fight about that. I heard something about that on talk radio, and I was like, laws are laws, and they're there for a reason. Our Creator has laws that He abides by. That's the simplest way to look at things. He has laws that He gave to us, and He abides by them. So law is good.
I believe if we have more activist judges, and I know who's likely to appoint that kind of judge, justice will go down greatly. Would you read the next scripture, please, Ken?
Sure. I see. And judgment is turned away backward, and justice standeth afar off. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter.
Truth has fallen in the street. Does that sound like the American media?
You see that verse quoted all the time on social media nowadays.
Like, did you all hear about 60 Minutes took an interview and they changed the answers out because I guess the answers made a certain politician look bad. In other words, we're not even pretending it's truth.
Yep. And you know what? Trump's suing them.
Yeah.
But they're not even pretending it's truth.
Texas.
It's all a show, baby. It's like when the J6 hearings, they hired a Hollywood producer to coordinate it. I said, wait a minute. Is this show business or is this legal? And I guess it was show business and false legal. And I'm not making that. Hollywood producer coordinated it. And I saw some of those witnesses, and they were poor actors. That's my humble opinion. Dishonesty destroys our relationship, and God hates it. And it's really bad. One of the 16 God hates is people who lie and cause trouble by what they say and the lies they tell that cause trouble between brothers. And that is a problem that we're getting into more and more. One of the things about lying is like an ointment that facilitates many other sins.
Mm-hmm. Or goes along with them. It's used to continue concealing them. However you slice it, it stops stops. It's added to it. If anything, it's not taking accountability. It's not being accountable for whatever's done and making it better or trying to make it right however you can. It's continuing on. It's persisting in another sin, if you will, or notching up the old scorecard.
One of the good things in God's law, if you perjure yourself in a trial so that somebody maybe would get the death penalty or he would get some really serious penalty, and they discovered that you lied, whatever penalty you wanted your lie to give to that person, you got it instead. So if you lied so somebody else get the death penalty, you'd get the death penalty.
Yeah.
And don't you think we need to punish people who perjure themselves before Congress and lie? And it just seems like most of the time they get away with it.
Well, only if you're on the left. If you're on the right, they haul you away in chains, as we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, the justice is very one-sided.
Yeah, didn't Bannon just get out of prison?
Yeah. For contempt, was it not? Contempt, because he wouldn't go through there.
Said, you don't have a right to pull me in front of Congress. I work for the administration, but Congress said no. And the Justice Department came after him. And I don't know all the details,
but they don't enforce those types of rules in the same way across the board. No, they use them when it suits them, when it's according to their purpose, correct, which is also not just.
But do you remember when the guy who was at one time head of the CIA, he told Congress, we're not spying and getting information on American citizens, only foreigners. A year later, when all the evidence came out, he admitted, yes, I did lie in front of Congress. We do monitor Americans. In case you didn't know that, the CIA is gathering information about you.
Oh, they've got a file on all of us.
Yeah, and see, but that's a big lie. But he never was prosecuted over that.
Oh. They never are.
Nor has anything been done to stop that practice. You think that was a big red flag moment, but that really just kind of went by like ho hum. We still want to use electronic devices, so I guess we'll just deal with that. And really, it's not like it's unknown now. It's just accepted. Sure, capture everything all the time. Yeah, you could turn on my computer, my phone, or whenever you want. You've got that. You've got all that power there. Just use that however you see fit. You good, honest fellows. You.
But here's something funny. I Echo Box. We were asking the Echo Box, "Are you listening to us?" And it says, I'm always listening.
Yeah, it's how it does its job.
Yeah, that's what it said. I'm always listening.
It has to, yeah.
It meant it in a good way, like if we ever needed it to look up stats or music or something, it would be ready. But it's always listening. How you like that?
I don't.
I'm not saying the government's always listening to me. We're not that important. But
don't kid yourself.
Yeah, it's not that. They collect everything all the time. They don't have to listen to you in real time. It doesn't take any body or whatever. They just keyword it later. It's all good.
Technically, there's only 40 million people. 340 million people in this country now, and the bandwidth it would take or the computing power it would take is minimal to be able to handle that. Yeah, I don't think it'd be a big deal. Not compared to what we have now.
What I have noticed though that if you are conservative and you're giving liberals a hard time, they will search all the records to find any dirt on you. Whereas a liberal, they got all kind of dirt hanging out. No, let me ignore it. We could care less about it. Have you noticed that? Very one-sided Bibling, yeah.
It's just the way things.
That's
the
that
way
is
of
bad,
life, man. Don't get upset about it.
That's true.
That's the way it is, man.
Let's read Proverbs 19:5.
A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape.
So see, God's law, he doesn't allow all that garbage, but in man's law, if you're with the establishment, the in crowd, the popular, the powerful, you can lie and get away with it. But lies do destroy friendship, They destroy justice, and they destroy marriages too. Lying to your spouse is a bad idea.
Oh yeah,
Well, unless your spouse asks you something like, "Do I look fat in this dress?"
If you value your existence.
I was sitting
That
there
doesn't apply to my wife. She's sitting here looking at me. None of that applies to her.
Of course not.
The lying, I was sitting here, I was thinking about that, and of all the 10 commandments, bearing false witness, that's probably the most broken commandment. I think it's probably, I'm guessing for myself, it's probably the first sin I ever committed. When did you get the cookie out of the cookie jar or whatever
me.
It was? Yeah, and
crumbs all over your face.
So
you might have coveted the cookie first, though. We have no way to know.
That's true.
That cookie was not for you.
But it's like when you hold yourself accountable, and I think it goes back. I was trying to see back here. You said dishonesty destroys our relationship, and God hates it. When we hold ourselves accountable, no matter what kind of a situation we got ourselves into, but we're not going to lie our way out of it, and we're going to do that. We're holding ourselves to have reverence towards God, to honor God, to respect Him. Even if I'm going to have to pay the penalty. I think what we try to do, the lying becomes easy because people think, well, I just did it and I have it concealed and it's right here. But right here, what does it say? A false witness will not go unpunished. It's going to be exposed. He will not escape. Eventually, you'll be held accountable some sort of way. But I think lying tends to be easy. And what do the people say? I just told a white lie.
Yeah,
it was just a little white lie. So it was partial, or I hid truth, or I did this, or whatever I did. However, I deceived. That's what it is, deceive. What did he say to Eve? He goes, "You will surely not die," is what he told her. And they didn't die then. God had to put a sacrifice so that they lived on. So people could still even believe that lie that Satan told. But he was talking about on a larger scale of what was going to happen. There were a lot of Walking Dead today. But if you tell partial truths, what is it? Satan uses a cup of lies to poison an entire lake of truth, because once that gets in there, it's already muddled. The degree of the lie, I guess, if it's a lie, it's a lie. Bottom line.
A good propagandist can use something everybody likes or believes in, and then somehow attach a big lie to it.
Yeah.
By the way, lies facilitate genocide. One of the things that Hitler supposedly said, I believe he said it, when you want to reach a large population, the bigger the lie, the better. Or in some cases, the exact opposite of the truth is what you tell. Let me give you my example. If someone says, if you really are a fascist, like Hitler and his party were fascists, and I know Mussolini started fascism, but Hitler also picked it up. If you're really into that sort of thing, you're going to tell the public, no, it's our opponents who are the real authoritative fascists. We're the good guys. You say the exact opposite of the truth. Or it's like the organization Antifa. That means they're anti-fascist. Actually, when Mussolini started the fascist movement, he had kids dressed up, mostly young people, in black, total black, sometimes at mass they could pull down, and they harassed and sometimes even poisoned and did horrible things to the opposition political party. And you could say, with his group of thugs, he intimidated his way, and some other good political arguments, to the presidency of Italy. But the Antifa in America, they also wear black. They do the exact same thing that Mussolini's fascist street thugs did. Hitler, they just didn't have enough black shirts. He had to use brown shirts. But the principle is the same thing.
Yep.
There are even some stories where the parliament, to get in the building, they had to go through a line of the brown shirts harassers screaming at them as they walked into the parliament building. You can imagine what that's like. You're going to go in there and vote against that party?
We see people doing that now.
That's what you were saying earlier was, it's like the devil's oldest trick in his playbook is to co-opt. He sits there and what he's doing, then he accuses the other of doing it. That's the oldest trick in the book, and you see that going on in politics today.
Certain people, almost anything they say, the opposite is like 90-some% probably true.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What they accuse you of is what they're planning and scheming to do.
And they're very clever with the words they use. I've always thought that it was very clever. The company or the Planned Parenthood, that makes it sound like it's something that is loving. Planned Parenthood, that sounds like we're having a baby, and they are promoting killing babies. And it's just the opposite. It's just crazy.
Women's health care, that's killing your baby, and gender affirming care, that's mutilating the body of teenagers.
And it's really gender denying
how weird that
care.
is?
Everything that they list is the 180 degrees from what they say it is. It's not gender affirming, it's gender denying care. It's not care at all. Nobody's getting any care.
And by the way, when they finish gender operating on your body, you will be sterile. And I think a lot of young people, when they first get into that, they don't realize they're going to sterilize me. I'll never be able to reproduce again. But that's how you call it semantic tyranny. They flip the meaning of words. Would you?
I think there's a Bible example I'd like to give. We read in John 8 earlier. Well, in John 7 is when Christ goes up to the Feast of Tabernacles, right? He's got to go secretly. It's known that they got it out for him, right? And he knows that they're after him. They're trying to kill him. And so he shows up in the temple and he starts teaching in the middle of the feast, right? And he ends up saying it. He said, none of you even keep the law. Like, I'm here, speaking on what's written and what's established and all that. And like, you have the law and you have Moses and all this stuff. And why don't you even keep it? And why do you go out to kill me? And they're like, what? Who's going around trying to kill you? Like, you've got a devil, you're possessed or crazy or something. Who's trying to kill you? Yeah, they were absolutely actively, searching for him. Everybody couldn't believe that he was able to be there and to teach in front of everyone and get away with it, essentially. And this contention continues, but it was a 180 degree opposite denial of exactly what they were trying to do. He spoke the truth openly, and they said, no, that's 100% wrong. Like, you're evil, like you're possessed to even suggest something like that. And what did they end up accusing him of? Oh, he's gonna destroy the temple. It's like, it's not even based on the intent behind anything that he actually said. It's any way to twist and to turn things in the opposite direction. It's absolute deception.
Would you read Jeremiah 9:3, please, Ken?
And like their bow, they have bent their tongues for lies. They are not valiant for the truth on the earth, for they proceed from evil to evil, and they do not know me, says the Lord, and every neighbor will walk with slanderers.
Are we becoming a nation of people who slander each other?
Yep.
Yep. It's in our music. It's in the culture of our music.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of music, but anyway, they say bad things about certain genders and stuff. Wow, that's music. Instead of sweet love, it's never mind. I'm gonna repeat some of the stuff in rap, get myself in trouble. But you have some vague idea what I mean, right? By the way, all these people are running around slandering Israel, from the river to the sea. I guarantee you that propaganda is most effective on low information voters. They know nothing, or they don't know as much as they should know. For instance, I'll bet you could talk to 20 of these college students run around, free Palestine, and you ask them, do you know anything about the history of the nation of Israel from 1948 to present? I'll bet you couldn't find 1 in 100 that even halfway understands it. For instance, in 1948, it was going to be 2 states, and the Arabs are going to have the biggest chunk of it, not the Jews. Did the Arabs want a 2-state solution? They had a 2-state solution. Guess what they did? They and their neighbors all attacked the Jews who, just arrived, didn't really have a full air force, weren't really ready for war. But after what the Jews went through in the Holocaust, they fought like mad and won and pushed back the borders. And they often tried for a 2-state solution. From what I understand, the Palestinians do not want a 2-state solution. You know what they want?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a one-state solution.
Yeah, and it doesn't involve the Jews.
Yeah.
Arafat could have had his 2-state solution decades ago, but he knew that if he had agreed to that, he'd be dead before the sun went down.
Yeah, that's not what they want. They wouldn't probably say genocide, but that's what it would end up turning out to be. And the ones that survive would be chased out of the Middle East to be scattered all over the world. But they do not, and I'm sure the devil's behind it, they do not want to share the holy sites with the Jews. They do not want, and none of these people know any of that history. I'll bet you they don't know it. And even when it comes to stuff in American history, they probably don't know much of that either.
I read an interesting article a couple months ago talking about not knowing history and talking about deception. It was about somebody who was from the West Bank who grew up, right there, right next to Israel. His father worked inside of Israel. He knew nothing of the history of that nation. There's no opportunities or anything. It's like you hope that you grow up and that you do go work across the border in Israel, because there aren't opportunities inside of the West Bank or anything. There's really nothing. There's no prosperity. There's nothing to do. It's pretty grim. Well, he ended up going to South Korea to study on a scholarship or something somehow. And only over there in South Korea did he learn anything about the history of Israel, about the Holocaust or World War II or the beginnings of that nation or what had transpired before. Had no idea growing up, within walking distance or anything like that. And you wonder how true that is of much of the rest of the Arab world. You're not going to get the whole story. You're not going to get both sides of the story. When you come to appreciate the historical presence there, and the Jews that were there, and the people that fled out of Europe and from these other pogroms and things, and what a disastrous thing that was, and the efforts to, like, the 2-state solution that was proposed in 1948 and rejected, violently and in war rejected. That history is not known by those who it concerns the most. I mean, of course, Israel knows that, but it's not like they're teaching that in Gaza or the West Bank, and likely not in the other nations around there. That other side of it is not going to be discussed.
Even American college students don't know it.
Yeah. That's
the shocking thing. And they're one of them saying, we're Hamas. They're bloodthirsty murderers. And some of our college students identifying with them. It's almost unbelievable. But if you're a politician and you want to say the complete truth, is it good for you? And the answer is no. Would you read the next scripture, Isaiah 59:15, please, Ken?
So truth fails, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. Then the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no justice.
Now, this is in Judah as they were falling away from God. But I've seen that principle here. If you're a major politician and you tell truth that the establishment does not want people to hear, they don't say, oh, it's nice to finally learn that truth. No, they go after you like vultures after prey, or hawks after prey. And I've seen, you could almost sense the press coming in with their claws to destroy a particular politician because he said truths they do not want the American people to hear. So telling the truth, and Tucker Carlson, of course, he says it much better than we could, but he knows more of Washington examples. He said he noticed this for years now, that the politicians that are brave enough to tell the complete truth are often attacked and destroyed. They're not rewarded. And that's the opposite of what you would think, wouldn't you?
Sounds like our government has a lot of secrets they want to keep.
And I know we're at the end of the program, and I just want to, for our final comments about prophecy, the two things I just want to emphasize, and you all can bring up what you'd like to. The Bible and God are the true arbiters of truth. The better we understand the Bible, the better we understand truth. And secondly, as we get closer to the age of the beast and the false prophet, evil propaganda and lies will get stronger and stronger and stronger. Truth will be more clouded and confused. Therefore, we have to resist deception and expect more of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of manipulation out there, and it's hard not to be vulnerable to it. It is.
Yep. Sometimes they work both sides of the street. So
They absolutely do. Yeah. If you think deception can't come from every different end of the spectrum, it will. It'll catch you wherever, you're weakest.
Yeah, and just
And
because
as
somebody's your
Christians-
favorite star in sports or movies, the establishment's probably got them too.
And as Christians, someday in the future, in our lifetime, we could see the ultimate deception that we have to be prepared for. I know God says he will keep us from that deception. We just got to make sure that we're doing his will, and that he sees fit to keep us from that deception, because it's going to gather up the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
One final question. Do you think most people appreciate the value of the ninth commandment?
What?
Appreciate the ninth commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness.
I don't think anybody
No.
likes being lied to. I think it hurts inherently.
Right.
And I don't think you have to be a righteous person, or you have to be particularly educated or anything to feel that. When you trust somebody, or you think you have a bond with somebody, and you realize that it's been broken, that you've been deceived, I think it hurts no matter who you are. And so maybe you don't generally appreciate it because you're going around trying to please everybody and tell them what they want to hear. And of course that dress looks good, honey, but when she figures out it doesn't, she's not going to trust you anymore. So you might as well figure out a nice way to tell the truth and be honest, be habitually honest. Because I think people get in a habit of being dishonest, and it's just too easy to tell everybody what you think they want to hear. And it's bad for everybody. And when that comes back around, and somebody that you're close to and that you trust, betrays that, you can see in that moment, that commandment proves itself so very true, because it hurts.
I guess it depends on which end of that you're on.
By the way, I just want to hold this book up. This is written by a bunch of scholars, most are French, but they examine communism in the 20th century. 100 million people were slaughtered by their own governments in purges, and a lot of it was covered and hidden by false propaganda. And a lot of people still believe in communism, and it's the most proven failure of the 20th century. But it's funny how evil doesn't die; it just keeps bouncing back.
Yeah, and they teach in colleges that that didn't happen. There's no 100 million dead.
Read the book. Maybe 40 million are from China, 22 million are from the Soviet Union, but there are a lot of others. 4 or 5 million from Vietnam.
Well, they hide it from their students.
A bunch from Cambodia. And when you go through the list, you will, even in countries close to America like Cuba, there are a lot of people murdered in Cuba. Would you believe that?
In fact, in Cuba, on a per capita basis, Castro murdered more people than any other communist regime per capita.
I didn't know that.
Yep. He was the worst per capita.
And everybody still thinks he and Che Guevara are great heroes.
Yeah.
To this day.
Che Guevara had a window put in his office so he could watch the people being tortured out in the courtyard where he was set up. He was just evil. And then until the CIA captured him, and then he got all squishy. I'll tell you anything you want to hear. I'll tell you anything you want to know. Yeah, he turned into quite the coward when he was on the losing end.
By the way, as far as prophecy goes, I can't think of anything going on. We'll have to see how the election comes out. And Israel seems to be winning against Hamas. I guess we'll see how that all works out. But that seems to be what's going on in the world. I hope we don't have to wait 2 or 3 weeks for the election results. And that's a bad sign. Plenty of time for cheating.
Oh, well, that's how it works, man, nowadays.
And if they steal another election, all I can say is you have to brace ourselves, because I believe it could happen. I know that's not what people want to hear, but I believe it's still a possibility.
I guess we're going to have to wait 5 days or maybe 2 weeks. Who knows now? I'd just be curious if the counting all stops at 2 a.m. again. In all the battleground states, if the counting stops at 2 a.m., you know it's not going to be pretty.
Or they find an excuse like the Atlanta. A toilet broke, so we have to shut it off. And then when the Republicans,
everybody go home.
They came back later and counted stuff 4 times for the Democrats. But anyway, you all probably know all that. Yes, I've already heard of some chicanery happening in the pre-voting, early voting in 1 and 2 places. So I just hope it's too big to rig.
I happen to believe that we witnessed a miracle by that bullet grazing his ear, and that shows a higher power was involved. And I think that's enough to know what's going to happen. That's just my personal opinion, but I don't think they're going to be able to change this outcome. And I don't know why. Maybe a lot of this country is fighting back against abortion or fighting back against gay marriage. And maybe there's enough people who feel that way and they're going to voice their opinion and they're talking about it. Maybe it's being talked about and we don't know it in the homes, and the word is getting out and the hearts of the people are kind of seeing for a moment that this stuff has just gotten way out of hand, and they're seeing the deep corruption. I got an email that, and I don't know, I hadn't fact checked it and all that, but what y'all were talking about, but it's talking about a lot of people who are big time politicians and the connections that they have with these, like so-and-so's nephew is married to so-and-so's, daughter. And it's very connected. If this is true, a lot of the media outlets and a lot of the big super donors and a lot of the politicians, it's like very interwoven.
It's all incestuous. All of the top of the media, the political realm, and business realm, and the 3-letter agencies. There's a lot of incestuous activity going on, but they're all interrelated, married. It's bizarre.
And
it's researchable, so you can
and it's in Hollywood, and it's and I think you said. I think people a lot of times want to say, well, it's this guy's fault or this guy's fault. But I think you said it at the beginning, Dr. Ricks, is Satan is the one that is swinging this sword wildly, and it's got a lot of people on it. But Satan is the one that's in charge. And I think, Michael, I wanted to say one thing though. But I thought he brought a good point out a minute ago, because we've been looking at this as people lie and they do this, but when you're lied to. And that's a good way to look at this, because you think about, just a home where a wife lies to a husband, which was being told to do. We saw that on the media, but a wife lying to how do you fix that? Even if you forgive that person, but you're always going to have a doubt. There's going to be a doubt that, depending on what degree the lie was, but you lose credibility, and am I going to doubt you? Am I going to be able to forget it and get over this? And so it creates problems when you go back to having that relationship. That's we read all through the Old Testament where Israel played the harlot, and that's what it was. It was spiritual harlotry. It was turning their back, and God wants to have people, a creation who love him, that respect him, that he trusts and loves. And that's what it comes down to, you know. That's exactly what it comes down to. But anyway. Oh yeah, go ahead.
All right. Is there anything else we wanted to discuss, or is that pretty much in the end? All right. Well, that being said, I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for tuning in after 3 weeks. You didn't forget about us. And we hope you all enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. And good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Ken.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.